نحن إلى جانب الجيش اللبناني، نحن إلى جانب القوى الأمنية الرسمية.
Good afternoon on this Friday, November 7th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. Lebanon's Druze leaders condemn fighting in the Syrian region of Mount Hermon. The removal of illegal kiosks in Tripoli sparks brief protests in the northern coast city. And in Gaza, a series of blasts targets homes of several leaders of Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party in the Hamas-ruled enclave. Lebanon's top Druze leaders Walid Jumblat and Talal Arslan have condemned the fighting in the predominantly Dirzi area of Syria's Mount Hermon, while expressing very different stances on the Syrian war. Now, Jumblat warned against dragging the Druze into the Syrian conflict, while Arslan said they were praying for supporting a unified Syria. Urging neutrality, Jumblat also warned Syria's Dirzi against the Assad regime. At least 40 people have been killed in the clashes between pro-government and opposition fighters in Beit Tima, a Dirzi majority region in southeastern Damascus province. After the fighting, 11 injured Syrian nationals were stopped from entering Lebanese territories in Hasbaya, in line with the decision by the government not to accept any more refugees. Syrian factions tried to bring the wounded from the Mount Hermon to Lebanese hospitals, but had to return the Syrian town of Beit Jin. Police have dismantled illegal kiosks and booths lining the seaside promenade in Tripoli's Amina neighborhood, triggering protests. The dismantling of the illegal construction started this morning in line with a decision by North Lebanon Governor Nassif Khallouch to preserve the 700-meter-long promenade along the coast. Police started removing the booths by force at dawn, triggering altercations with vendors who burned tires in protest and briefly blocked the coastal way. The campaign for cleaning up the area will continue until around 200 illegal kiosks are removed. Also in Tripoli, a night curfew on motorcycles has been imposed, aiming at tightening security after army positions were targeted several times by assailants on motorbikes. Defense Minister Ali Hassan Khalil says he will not accept that Lebanon becomes a drug exporting center after security forces foiled an attempt to smuggle a large quantity of Captagon drug pills to the UAE. After touring the Beirut port premises, the finance minister stressed the importance of restoring confidence in state institutions, especially those tasked with security. Khalil applauded the close cooperation between the country's security agencies and warned customs officials against favoritism and bribery to facilitate smuggling, saying trafficking is comparable to tax evasion in terms of harmfulness to the state's financial stability. Maronite Patriarch Shaddai is lashing out against politicians for destroying the country. These are his words. This comes after the Lebanese parliament voted to extend its term by 2 years and 7 months. At a press conference ahead of his return to Beirut after a 2-week visit to Australia, Shaddai slammed the politicians for protecting their seats against the Constitution and the will of the people, and said the masks have fallen from the faces of the Lebanese officials. The Patriarch also criticized MPs who rejected the extension, saying they should resign from the parliament in protest. Only 2 representatives voted against the extension bill, while 31 boycotted the session altogether. Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the U.S. military's Joint Chiefs of Staff, is assuring the American public during a speech in New York City that the Islamic State group can be defeated. During an appearance at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs in New York City, Dempsey described the current situation in Iraq and Syria and the global fight against the extremist group.
Militarily, I would describe our campaign against ISIL or ISIS as Iraq first, as I've said, because we have a credible partner there, while simultaneously conducting airstrikes to disrupt ISIL inside of Syria, notably eastern Syria, where they tend to be discernible from all the other groups inside of Syria, and simultaneously seeking to build a force of moderate opposition, a training and equipping of a moderate opposition that could initially, and militarily now, could initially separate by moving from, let's call it, south to north and in the eastern part of Syria, could separate this group called ISIL and isolate the two pockets of it, one in Iraq that we're making progress against, and one in Syria, which we're disrupting, but we don't have a defeat mechanism in place yet. That's a military term. What is it that will lead to the defeat of ISIL in Syria? It's some opposition that will confront it, enabled by us. So north of Aleppo right now is just almost, it's a Rubik's Cube, frankly. And the more you try, it's like the Heisenberg principle. Every time you touch it, it changes, and you have something new to consider. So this is a case of staying true to the principle that we will, over time, defeat ISIL. And we'll do it through regional actors, not despite regional actors. And there's going to be cases where ISIL will have tactical success. But if we're true to the principle, then over time, we believe we can defeat ISIL with them.
Coming up next, Benjamin Netanyahu assures Jordan's king that he will not bow to demands by far-right Jewish activists. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future Television. The International Criminal Court says it will not investigate Israel's 2010 raid on a Turkish flotilla that killed 9 Turkish activists. The ICC's chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, said she believes Israeli soldiers may have committed war crimes during the raid on the Mavi Marmara vessel of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, but has decided the case is beyond the court's remit.
I have determined that there is a reasonable basis to believe that war crimes under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court were committed on one of the vessels, the Mavi Marmara, when Israeli Defense Forces intercepted the flotilla on the 31st of May 2010. However, after carefully assessing all relevant considerations, I concluded that the potential case or cases likely arising from an investigation into this incident would not be of sufficient gravity to justify further action by the court. I may reconsider my decision in the light of new facts or evidence. Under the Rome Statute, the referring state, and in this case, the Union of the Comoros, also has the right to request International Criminal Court judges to review my decision not to proceed to open an investigation.
Israel's prime minister is assuring Jordan's king over the phone that he will not yield to demands by Jewish hardliners to allow Jews to pray at the Al-Aqsa compound in Jerusalem. The phone call between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and King Abdullah II came after Jewish settlers protected by Israeli security forces stormed the Al-Aqsa mosque, triggering clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians and prompting Jordan to recall its ambassador to Israel. Netanyahu said Israel will keep the status quo over the Al-Aqsa Mosque, referring to it by the Jewish name Temple Mount. Since Israel occupied East Jerusalem in 1967, Jewish worshippers have been allowed to visit but not pray at the site.
I spoke today to King Abdullah of Jordan, and we agreed that we'll do every effort to calm the situation. I explained to him that we're keeping the status quo on the Temple Mount, and that this includes Jordan's traditional role there as consistent with the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. We have to make every effort to restore calm, quiet, and security.
A series of coordinated explosions are targeting the homes of several leaders of President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party in the Gaza Strip. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but the explosions come at a time of rising tensions with Hamas. Faiz Abu Ita, a Fatah leader in Gaza, said no one was hurt in the attacks. The rival parties Fatah and Hamas have recently pledged to reconcile, but there are still deep differences. Fatah officials in Gaza are planning on commemorating the death of party founder Yasser Arafat on November 11th for the first time since 2007, when at least 10 people were killed in clashes between the rivals, but Hamas activists have spoken out against the event. Libya's highest court is ruling that general elections held last summer are unconstitutional and that the country's parliament and government resulting from that vote should be dissolved. The Supreme Constitutional Court handed down the ruling in the capital of Tripoli, which is controlled by militias from the western coastal city of Misrata. The development further deepens the rift in the politically divided Libya, which many fear could spiral into civil war. The turmoil has left the country with two rival administrations, one of which is supported by Islamist militants who took control of Tripoli after the political allies lost the June elections. The U.S. House of Representatives Speaker John Boehner says the Republicans' 2015 agenda includes building the Keystone Oil Pipeline and repealing Obamacare in his first news conference since Tuesday's Republican victory in the midterm elections. The speaker also expressed skepticism about the ongoing Iranian nuclear negotiations.
You've heard me talk many times about the many jobs bills that the outgoing Senate majority has ignored. Those bills will offer the Congress, I think, a new start. We can act on the Keystone Pipeline, restore the 40-hour work week that was gutted by Obamacare, and pass the Hire More Heroes Act that would encourage our businesses to hire more of our veterans. And again, this is just a start. Obamacare is hurting our economy, it's hurting middle-class families, and it's hurting the ability for employers to create more jobs. And so the House, I'm sure, at some point next year will move to repeal Obamacare because it should be repealed and it should be replaced with common sense reforms that respect the doctor-patient relationship. Now, whether that can pass the Senate, I don't know. I don't trust the Iranians. I don't think we need to bring them into this. And I would hope that the negotiations that are underway are serious negotiations, but I have my doubts.
Chocolate maker ISIS, or ISIS I should say, is changing its name to Libeert, L-I-B-E-E-R-T, to avoid being associated with the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Late last year, the Belgian chocolate maker changed its name from Italo-Swiss because the company no longer had any real association with either country. Unfortunately, it picked ISIS as its new name. Also, the acronym derived from the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The group changed the name to just Islamic State in June, but the chocolate maker says it is still suffering by association and that it would never have chosen the name had they known about the Islamic State. It has become a costly mistake for the business, who estimates a loss of between 2 and 3 million euros due to the unfortunate associations. Those are your headlines for today. Let me remind you of them. Lebanon's Druze leaders condemn fighting in the Syrian region of Mount Hermon. The removal of illegal kiosks in Tripoli sparked brief protests in the northern coastal city. And in Gaza, a series of blasts target homes of several leaders of Muhammad Abbas's Fatah party in the Hamas-ruled enclave. This wraps up your Friday headlines here live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal signing off. Have a good weekend.
نحن إلى جانب الجيش اللبناني، نحن إلى جانب القوى الأمنية الرسمية.